common feature of furniture from the Federal period is to have a line of inlay on the leg down near the floor called cuff banding, and that's what you see here on this card table leg. This looks like it would be a difficult inlay to make, but it's not. It's actually quite simple. And to start making it, I drew it out full size so that I could have 3 equal triangles of holly that span from one corner to the other, and then that required me to accurately mill my legs so that the pattern would repeat on all 4 sides. And from that I determined the thickness of the stock that I needed. Here is the milled stock. I have a piece of mahogany and a piece of holly. They're approximately 2 inches wide by 12 inches long. Those dimensions aren't critical. It is critical, though, that the edges are parallel to one another. If one board is wider than the other, that doesn't matter at all, but those edges do have to be parallel, and it is essential that they are planed to exactly the same thickness, in this case 3/8 of an inch. From the drawing I determined the angle at which I need to cut, and I've set that up accurately here on the power miter box, and I'm going to chop a miter on both ends of each piece of the mahogany and of the holly. The next cut's going to take place here at the bandsaw, and I have it fitted with a 3/8 inch wide 6-pitch blade that's 14 thousandths of an inch thick. That's a very thin blade. It minimizes the waste. I have the table tilted at the same angle that I used at the miter box, and I've clamped on this straight edge, which is just nothing more than a scrap piece of wood to act as a fence. And I've carefully adjusted that fence so that when I cut the piece free, I have an infinitesimally small flat here at the sharp point of the triangle, and that will ensure a uniform thickness to the finished inlay. Here's a close-up of the setup, and in order to maintain the uniformity required, I need to have consistent hand pressure as I feed this through the saw. I can't be pressing very hard in this direction. I want most of the force to be along the beam of the saw because it's so easily deflected. The individual pieces are now cut, and after cutting a piece free from the bandsaw, I take the block back to the miter box and clean up that miter there, and then repeat until I had the required number of individual segments cut. And this is a special purpose inlay, so I only made it about 6 inches long. That'll allow me to do one leg with each strip that I cut off, and this block here would do many legs, so that's plenty for the project at hand. And I have here a piece of 1/16 inch holly veneer. This is kind of an unusual thickness for holly. Before I found this, I used to have to make it myself by resawing it and sanding it to thickness. And this is one of the few instances where I use white glue. I'm just going to spread a good coat on here, brush it around. White glue is much more convenient than hide glue, which is what I normally use. And then carefully take these segments here and place them on there, making sure they're pointed in the right direction and they're in firm contact with one another. And there's a slight ragged cut, so I had to use some fine sandpaper to clean that up so that they would nest together well. And you have to work quickly because the glue starts to wrinkle up the veneer. I can pick up more than one at a time, I guess. Make sure that they're kind of in alignment. We don't want any sticking out more than the other. Press that down. Now I'm going to dribble a little bit of glue in here. This is a somewhat fragile inlay even after it's complete because it's not the best glue surface where all those points come together. It's not quite enough glue. Now I can load in pieces of holly. And I don't really want the holly to go all the way down because I don't want to spread them out, the mahogany pieces, so I'm just going to lightly lay them in there, and then when I apply the clamping pressure they'll even out and automatically nest together in the proper way. Now there's one that I didn't like. I left that in the pile by mistake. There was one that was a little crooked. And there's the other one. Okay, now put some glue on here. Carefully brush that around. Sure I got good coverage. And then I have a piece of 1/16 inch mahogany veneer. Press that on top of there. Take this block here, which is an old shelf cut off that the glue won't bond to. And I like to use a clamp that applies just axial pressure as opposed to like a C-clamp, because that wants to twist things out of alignment. So I've got this quick acting clamp here. I'll just press that together. And once I get it sufficient pressure on there, then I can come back with some C-clamps and really put the pressure on, but this locks it in place so it doesn't move around. The initial glue up has come out of the clamps, and now it's time to add the final pieces of veneer to complete the inlay. On the top here I'm going to put a piece of 1/16 inch mahogany followed by a piece of 1/16 inch holly, and then on the bottom of the stack I'll have another piece of 1/16 inch holly. The inlay is out of the clamps, the edges have been squared up, and it has been glued to this piece of sacrificial pine here, which acts as a handle so that you can safely push it through the saw and get the maximum yield out of it. I have the saw set up with that same thin kerf blade to rip off a piece that's approximately 40 thousandths of an inch thick, and in between each saw cut I will plane this face here, and then that planed face will be what will be glued down into the recess. It gives the best glue joint, and then that will leave the rough surface to be flushed up later.